Hi folks, Mythic ODM here. Well, lots of news in the realm of Wizards of the Coast in the past week. Some good, but lots of things are not that great. So today I want to chat about the cancellation of the Dragonlance project, the Hasbro financials, and of course the release dates of the 50th anniversary year for Dungeons & Dragons. So let's start with the news that really should not have come as a surprise to anyone paying attention to the goings-on with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. Now, in an interview with comicbook.com, Joe Bangadello spoke about his passion project, Dragonlance, and he is super passionate about it. It was supposed to be a new fantasy series, and it has been shelved from Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. He did have some harsh criticism for Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons in general, and how he feels that they've kind of lost their way since 5th edition. Why this was canceled should not be a shock because of three factors. One, the poor performance of the D&D Honor Amongst Thieves movie last year, which I loved and I've watched many, many times. So even though it made over 200 million and just about beat the Marvels for total gross box office, it still lost money when you factor in the movie's production and marketing budgets. I still feel the release date was very poor with the OGL debacle fresh on the community's minds, and the fact it was squished between John Wick 4 and the Super Mario movies. If they would have released it in September or October when the theaters were starved for content, it likely would have been a much bigger success. But, when your flagship brand of Dungeons & Dragons cannot turn a profit, a lesser known campaign setting would not have fared much better. Depending on what they were envisioning for the budget, it was likely very much weighted against the returns it was going to have for potentials. Number two, the sale of E1 Entertainment from Hasbro. When the movie panned and the launch of the D&D Adventure channel was pretty much a bomb, this is not a surprise that the new owners were very leery of a potential investment in the film or television side of Dungeons & Dragons, especially one that had the third problem. Number three, the Dragonlance adventure book and board game sales were absolutely abysmal. There are videos of board games at a deep discount in the US place called, I think it's Ollie's, and they were selling the board game for pennies on the dollar, and even Amazon was blowing them out when I looked at it yesterday. So that is never a good thing at all. Again, this one can fall directly on Wizards of the Coast's shoulders, as their content for creating campaign settings has a track record of pretty much just being rush jobs that fail really to ignite the imaginations of DMs or give them tools that make lasting campaigns, make a DM want to invest in purchasing the product. And that's kind of rough all around. Joe went on to tout how well received his vision and screenplay were given by producers and even Tracy Hickman and Margaret Wise, and they were all on board. Now, apparently, Joe even tried to wrangle some folks together to buy the Dragonlance IP from Wizards to no avail. But when we get into the next topic, maybe he can try again. Now, during the financial report that came out a couple days ago that I'm about to talk a lot more about here, Chris Cox, the CEO, did say they were having some adventures within the entertainment spectrum. They were working on and things were in development, but he honestly didn't go into much details. Obviously, Dragonlance isn't going to be part of that. So there are two big ticket announcements that came out of Hasbro and the Wizards of the Coast teams. Now, I think both are very important, but for very different reasons. So let's talk about the gloomy news from Hasbro. As I stated before, Hasbro released their financials for the last quarter, and they were bad, like really bad. The reports state in the past quarter, they had lost just over $1 billion, and that's pretty much insane. Now, they do state that the sale of E1 was a giant chunk of it, but still, when you start showing you're losing $1 billion, that's really bad. So their share prices dropped by 5% as well on the news, and they had to make some reforecasting of their numbers for 2024, and that's not good news either. So they stated that in Q3, revenue declined 10%, with significant growth in Wizards of the Coast and digital gaming segment being 40%, but it was not able to offset declines in consumer products, 18% down, and entertainment, 42% down. That would have been the D&D and other stuff. Wizards of the Coast revenue growth was driven by the success of licensed digital games such as Baldur's Gate 3 and Monopoly Go, which drove $63 million of incremental revenue in Q3. They say they're on track to deliver approximately $200 million of gross cost savings in 2023 as part of the Operational Excellence Initiative. They've reduced their owned inventory by 27%, including a 34% decline in consumer product inventory. Now, let's break all this down a little bit and really kind of go over it. These statements really show that if it weren't for Baldur's Gate 3 and Monopoly Go, then even Wizard of the Coast would have shown a large loss for this year for Hasbro. The reduction in consumer products is not really a surprise. Their products have been pretty lackluster. Dragonlance was a bust at the end of 2022, which carried on into 2023. Planescape did not sell very well. And of course, the deck of many things cost them a ton in misprints and delays. And of course, the moment you announce a new version of your flagship Dungeons & Dragons, sales of the current books will pretty much hit the toilet right away. So the good news for Hasbro is that they did decrease their inventory, and that actually is a really good thing. So being a former game store owner, I can assure you that having products sitting on shelves and not moving is never a good thing. Keeping your inventory lean but not out of stock is the key to success in a retail setting. Being a wholesaler is the same thing. Inventory takes up space. Space costs money and limits how much other things you can bring in to sell. So clearing out room in warehouses in anticipation of things like the player's handbook, DMG, and the Monster Manual makes sense, especially as Hasbro is using their own distribution system instead of outside partners, which again, to me, makes perfect sense and is actually a pretty smart business strategy. The more steps they can remove from getting the product into stores is better for them, as each step takes a little nibble out of what they can charge for their products. They then try to gloss over the layoffs, I think, by stating that they will see about $200 million in cost savings from an operational excellence initiative. And that's pretty much the corporate talk for the layoffs and shutting down offices, warehouses, etc. So, ouch. Now, the odd thing is that even in the 50th year of D&D, which should be a monster year for them, they are forecasting a drop in revenue for Wizard of the Coast this year. So that's kind of never a good thing. They see the physical consumer product sales lowering, which again makes sense. It means that they're banking on D&D Beyond and any other digital product to bolster their sales numbers. They've even mentioned that they expect Baldur's Gate 3 to have a long tail, meaning sales will continue for quite a while, and that they should have more digital products coming out starting in 2026, kind of like what Baldur's Gate did. So they're really banking on digital products to pull up their numbers. Now, the execs, I guarantee you, are looking at Baldur's Gate 3, believing they can replicate that. But again, it is highly unlikely. Baldur's Gate 3 took 6 years to release. Hasbro cannot wait that long for another smash success. Anything rushed will potentially harm the brand if the quality sucks. And you can believe that gamers will compare anything that comes out in the next few years to what Baldur's Gate is, and has a very high standard to match, let alone beat. Other concerning news from the report is that they state that they were originally planning to cut costs by about $350 million this year, and they now estimate that it needs to be cut by $750 million. Now, there are only so many ways to cut costs, and we've already seen nearly 2,000 layoffs in 2023. Likely more coming this year. And that has to be so stressful for those left in the company. I've been there myself. Maybe Joe and friends can approach Hasbro again to purchase Dragonlance IP if they get more desperate for cash flow. Now, on the positive, they did manage to pay off a huge chunk of loans, and Magic the Gathering is still going extremely strong with crossover IPs that they're bringing out, such as the Lord of the Rings, which is huge, Doctor Who, and a whole bunch more. Now, I won't get into too much more financial stuff, though. It gets complex, and explaining it is really, really dull. Everyone can continue to watch how Hasbro deals with lower sales expectations and less profit coming in over the year. Bankruptcy always is a step away, but it would have to get very dire for that to happen. The bright spot, sort of, was a release announcement from Wizard of the Coast on their 50th anniversary. Now, this is odd in a few ways, and we'll take a quick look at it. So first off, the level 10 to 20 adventure, Vecna's Eye of Ruin, sets players against the cult phenomenon that is Vecna. Now, most folks who are not even into the game know, kind of, who or what Vecna is, thanks to Stranger Things and using the D&D villain as a name of their big bad guy in the past couple of seasons. So this adventure is supposed to be 256 pages, and they state it will take players through the multiverse. And am I the only one who is getting tired of the word multiverse being bantered about all the time? At any rate, they state players will see familiar sights from the Forgotten Realms, Eberron, Ravenloft, Dragonlance, and Greyhawk in search of the Rod of Seven Parts. Now, the retail price on this bad boy is $70 USD. And this is interesting, as normally Dungeons & Dragons adventures only run from level 1 to 10. Maybe to 11 or 13. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage runs to 20th, but it has a ton of spell limitations that make it kind of manageable. So it'll be very interesting to see what Wizards does for those that can make game-breaking combos, such as having a spell gem and wish, or the simulacrum, copy loops, etc., etc. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, in June, we get the making of the original Dungeons and Dragons, which is more of a history book than anything else that a regular player would pick up. The interesting thing is that it is to be included as a first draft of D&D written in 73. I was a year old.
You're old.
Now, honestly, I would have picked it up, but it's set on Amazon as $100 USD.
I feel shocked.
Now, looking at it, it is likely a 400 plus page behemoth, but still, damn, that's a lot of money for a history book, and not something you can actually use in your game other than the knowledge of what happens. So July sees The Quests of the Infinite Staircase, which, much like the Tales of the Yawning Portal, gives an anthology of previous adventures revamped for 2024 edition. Now, is it me, or does this seem just like another money grab for no real work? I mean, there are already tons of third-party rewrites for many of the classic adventures, so I don't see this as being game-changing or groundbreaking. It's just rehashing their older stuff. So now here's where things get really weird. I've been stating all along that I thought they would release the big 3 core rulebooks at Gen Con in August. But now the Player's Handbook is slated to come out September 17th, which I guess is fine, but it's really late in the year, mind you. Now, the odd thing is that the DMG comes out on November 12th, a full 2 months later than the PHB, and then the Monster Manual is not slated until February 18th of 2025. Now, that is 3 months after the DMG and nearly 6 months after the Player's Handbook. So players and DM will have a revised rulebook, but no monsters to take them up against. Now, I assume that monsters are being reworked kind of as the classes have, but that's pretty crazy. It's a really hefty gap. They will likely release some tidbits on D&D Beyond, but having gaps in releases is normal. Even Paizo has a 4-month gap between the player core and the monster core, but they released their Game Master core at the same time as the player core, allowing GMs to have both and get the dice rolling. I don't understand why there's so much time between the D&D books. It is kind of baffling. I would have expected a September, October, November release, or maybe December for a time frame to get all their core books out. When they released 5th edition in 2014, it was August, September, and then December for their books. And the DMG was actually last. The Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual came out pretty much back to back to ensure players and DMs could really start playing. So I guess this is just really, really poor timing on their part. Now, I've never believed that they would be releasing all the core books in May, as one of the media clips showed. There was just no time left, as they were seriously delayed by the OGL debacle last January. I will still chalk up the visual they put up as an honest mistake by the art department or the media department. One thing you have to remember is printing takes time. And if they already have the Vecna book set for that date, then there was no way they would or even could release 4 books in a single month. That would have been just logistically insane. Most DMs don't have that kind of cash to drop on 4 books in a month. Remember that the core books are supposed to be 70 or 80 USD per book. With the Vecna adventure, that would have been 280, 300 US to shell out as a DM. And that's a big ask, and sales would have really taken a hit. The adventure would probably be the last thing to purchase. And then honestly, the DMG, the DMs need the Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual first and foremost. So if they are, DMing and have enough resources available, they can really do without the DMG and the adventure. Now, one of the big things to remember is there are no print shops in the US that can handle that kind of volume. They aren't printing a few books here. They're printing a massive amount. And to have all 3 core books plus an adventure in the same month would just not have been physically possible. What I can believe is a more likely scenario is they originally planned to release the Player's Handbook in May, DMG probably in June, and then the Monster Manual probably in August or so. But when the whole OGL debacle blew up last January, and you can click on the link here-ish with my rundown of what happened, it delayed any community input and further releases of the Unearthed Arcana, playtest packets, etc. by around 4 months. So you look at the release date of September and roll it back by 4 months. That puts it in May. Now, those that believe this have a very valid reason to. I tend to lean towards this as well, as not releasing their core books during the 50th anniversary just seems counterintuitive, especially in that odd order. So it's very much an up and down week for D&D folks. So I guess we're just going to have to kind of wait and see how things shake out. What do you think about the announcements? what do you think the future holds for Wizards of the Coast and D&D in particular? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And while you're there, remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons and even ring that bell for notifications. Do you think Wizards of the Coast is still safe from being sold off with all the content that Chris Cox says is supposedly coming out in the next couple of years? Do you even see them moving to a fully digital experience and dropping hardcover publishing altogether? I'd love to hear your thoughts about these things down below. And well, that's it for me. Thanks for hanging out with me today. But in the meantime, and in between time, I thank you all for your continued support and comments. I will see you all in the next video. And until then, may all your games be full of myth, mirth, and magic. Bye for now.